Quite the audience we have out here today. Coming off of the heels of International Women's Day yesterday, when I walked in here and I was sitting in the corner, I looked around and I said, wow, I'm amazed at how many women we have in the audience. So why don't we just get a little engagement? Raise your hand if you're a woman in the audience here. Look at that. I mean, that's amazing. So when I started in security operations about 12 years ago, I worked in a SOC, a security operations center, and about 50 people. I should say 50 men because it was 50 men and 2 women. And now that's 4%, and now we're looking at, I'd say 20 to 30% of the people in the audience today are women. I think that's fantastic. So quick round of applause for women, all the women in the audience today. Glad to have it. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the evolution of enterprise security operations as I've seen it over the past 12 years. Before I dive into that, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and I'll tell you a little bit about Aptiv. Aptiv's an automotive technology company, roughly 190,000 employees, 200 locations across the globe, very difficult to manage from a cybersecurity perspective. That said, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. We've seen some pictures today of what hackers don't look like. Well, let me show you what they might look like. Okay, this is Christmas 1994. That's me, 8 years old. No, I'm not a hacker, but this is what the attacker might look like. So a little bit about me. 30 years of hands-on keyboard experience, starting right about then. Over the last decade, focused on cybersecurity at various enterprise organizations, Aptiv, PTC out of Boston before that, United Natural Foods. There's been lots of challenges over the years, and I've seen some major changes. My biggest strength is just drastically simplifying complex issues. Security operations is definitely a complex issue. So I'd like to share sort of my experience with that and how I think we can all benefit going forward. So these are the things I'm going to talk to you about. The history, as I see it, of cybersecurity operations, having one throat to choke, what has changed, introduction of DevOps into the enterprise, business-led IT, and know that M and ampersand being crossed out is not a mistake. There's no more M&As, right? So there's no more mergers and acquisitions. There's just acquisitions. Companies just buying companies and never merging them in. That's just a big challenge. So where are we today? Distributed responsibility. I was telling somebody yesterday, I hate the term shared responsibility. AWS and Amazon, they all talk about shared responsibility. I don't really see it as shared responsibility. It's really distributed responsibility. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then the path forward. So while I was putting this together, the thought crossed my mind, is what I'm going to be telling them today something they could just go to they could get from AI, they go to ChatGPT. And I was like, I'd never used it before, so I went on and I asked ChatGPT, how have cybersecurity operations changed over the years? And I was actually surprised. It actually came back with a pretty good paragraph, a few bullet points of how things have changed. And I said, wow, this actually reads really well. If I was back in my college days, writing essays would be a lot easier. So some of the things that spit out, increased reliance on automation and machine technology. Very true. I mean, these are things that are almost necessary nowadays because of the pace, how quickly things move. Greater emphasis on proactive security, absolutely. Finding threats before they find you. Integration of security into DevOps. DevOps is everywhere now. It's like popcorn. Every day some new DevOps team is popping up in my organization anyways. A shift to cloud-based security, things moving very, very quickly, and increased collaboration and sharing of threat intelligence. So I thought, again, this is good information. It's almost reads like marketing material to me, but you know what? Let's take it one step further. So, ChatGPT, what's the biggest challenge of cybersecurity operations? Again, it came back with a response that I was like, well, this is pretty impressive. This is going to put me out of a job pretty soon. So complexity, compliance, budget constraints. Let's do one more engagement. How many people have dealt with budget constraints in their cybersecurity program? Anybody? Anybody's arms working today? Yeah, every single day it's a budget constraint. I want to hire more people. I want to buy more tools. It's always begging for money. And user behavior. Users really are the weakest link. I think that user education, awareness, and training is huge, but it's one of the many challenges that we have to deal with. So overall, ChatGPT did a great job, but it was lacking a little bit of the experience that I'm going to share with you today. So good job, AI. You got a little ways to go, but keep up the good work. So let's talk about the history. So the history of security operations. When I started in cybersecurity, or even before cybersecurity, if there was a problem with a server, let's say server got infected, it's compromised, who do we go to? Oh, you go to the server team and talk to Joe. He manages the server team. If there was a problem with a network switch, who do you go to? Oh, go to the network team. Talk to Lisa. She manages the network team. Where's that documented? Nowhere. It's up here. It's nice and easy. We got one team, one network team to talk to, one server team to talk to. Very easy. Things have changed a little bit. We've got acquisitions. So companies like the one I work for, I'm sure your companies too, are constantly looking to add new companies to their portfolios, right? There is no more merging. It's, hey, we want to bring this company, we're going to buy this company, and we just kind of want to let them operate on their own for a little bit. We don't want to touch them, don't bother them, stay hands off. We're going to give them a corporate laptop, but everything else, we're just kind of let them do their own thing. That creates a huge gap for security. Now you've got potentially multiple security teams, or the company may have one security person that's doing everything. And all of a sudden, you don't have one team responding to security alerts. You've got compliance gaps. So M&As, or just A's, acquisitions, are a big source of trouble for cybersecurity professionals. DevOps, like I said, DevOps teams are popping up like popcorn, and you never know when the next one's going to pop up. So DevOps, they like to manage all of their own infrastructure, and when a DevOps team comes on board, or starts working, and you find out, okay, they're standing up public-facing services, that's a whole new set of point of contacts to communicate with, right? So let's say even if you are managing or monitoring the cloud environments, because maybe they're working out of Azure and you're hooked into their cloud environment to pull alerts and get it into your SOC, you still have to know who to contact, right? So something goes on, hey, we got a vulnerability on this system, or we're seeing some IOC activity. Who do I contact? So it's not that one throat to choke anymore. It's not, oh, go talk to the network team or the network manager or the server team manager. It's, all right, we need to go to a spreadsheet, say, okay, this asset's this cloud account's owned by this person. We talk to them. They don't actually own the cloud account and the DevOps team, but they can tell you who does. So it's kind of tracking down those business owners. Next, and that kind of leads to business-led IT. So business-led IT kind of goes hand in hand with DevOps, but not necessarily. So you might have sites where they're a manufacturing site, and they're not centrally managed by the corporate IT team. What they have is an IT manager. He's one guy. One guy manages the whole site, and he's the point of contact for anything that's going on there. And what that leads to is a lot of what I call undermanaged devices. Not necessarily unmanaged, because technically they've got an IT manager, right? And that's his job. But they're undermanaged devices. Not all of the devices have endpoint protection on them. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them are set up to log to the SIM, and some of them aren't. That's a huge gap. That creates more gaps in the security operations portfolio. Also, we have a tech-savvy workforce. So I don't know how many of you remember Oregon Trail, but you've got people who are growing up today, or grew up 20 years ago with the Oregon Trail, and it started on computers, and now you've got this tech-savvy workforce that's, I can just manage my own PC. I've got some IT experience. They're looking for a site manager for this site. I'll be the IT site manager. Why not? And that's great, but if you don't go to school, you don't have the proper training, and you don't have the experience, there's a big difference between using a computer and administering it, right? So there's a lot of people who have gotten into the workforce, are great and savvy, which is great. I think it's great that we have people that are tech savvy, but there has to be a recognition that there are controls that need to be put in place. There's safeguards. And I think most people do understand that, but it has to be balanced. It's all balanced with the business objectives. So where does that leave us? Well, it might leave you with something like this, where you've got dozens of teams where, 10 years ago you could count all of your server team, your network team on one hand. Now you can't even count the number of teams on all your hands and your feet together. So you really need to have some way of keeping track of all of these points of contacts, all of these escalation procedures, who the site contacts are, because it's not something you can just remember in your head anymore, right? It's something where it needs to be documented. Otherwise, you're going to have inconsistent escalations. Today, we got a ticket for this asset, we escalate to this person. Tomorrow, we escalate to somebody else because it's not written down anywhere. So you have to have some form of documented, some system to keep track of all these things and pull them together. It really goes back to the NIST CSF. Most of you have probably heard of it. The identify phase of the NIST CSF. So it's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The identify phase, where we're really talking about inventorying your hardware assets, your software assets, and the stakeholders, making sure you've got all of those pieces together and documented to serve as the foundation for your security operations program. So let's talk a little bit about the path forward here. This is how I see things. So the old way, asset ownership information was common knowledge, right? Again, server, go to the server team. Network switch, router, go to the network team. That has to go away. That mentality has to go away. Things need to be documented now. You need a system like a ServiceNow or a remedy ticketing system where you're leveraging their CMDB. You're pulling all this information into the CMDB and integrating it with the Security Operations Center. And that last part's critical, because if you just have the information there and it's not tied into your Security Operations Center, you're not making it available to them, it's still pretty useless, or at minimum, there's still going to be manual processes involved, right? So pulling that information so that when an alert comes in, your security operations team, hey, here's a ticket, we've got this XYZ popped on a system, malicious piece of software showed up. Who do we reach out to? Point of contacts there, escalation procedures, contact information. Hey, this, we don't want to be talked, we don't want to be called between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m. And if you can't reach us, here's the next person in the chain, next person in the chain. All of that needs to be fleshed out, or else you can't really have an effective security operations team. Some of this information is common sense if you're setting up a managed security services provider, but it hasn't really been common sense for enterprises, because the historical enterprise has just been that simple setup where we just know who to go to, and it hasn't been so complex. But now with all acquisitions coming on board, DevOps teams, business-led IT, and under-managed devices, there's so many more points of contacts that you have to have. So it's really important to take a structured, documented approach to your security operations and escalation procedure, really treating each of those groups as a customer. So you got to remember, you're really providing a service to the business, and you have to treat those individual groups as customers. Sometimes each with different escalation procedures, different ways of treating things, and taking that kind of services first approach. So asset owner contact info really should not be stored in spreadsheets. That's kind of the evolution I've seen. Originally it was, okay, it's just stored up here, I know who to contact. Things started to get a little more complex. We started putting it in spreadsheets. Well, spreadsheets are really good at one thing, becoming outdated. So getting that information out of spreadsheets into a system of record like a CMDB, where the contacts get emailed quarterly and are asked to update their contact information, their escalation procedures. That's critical, because if you're not following up with your customers and saying, hey, can you make sure your information is still accurate? They're not going to go out of the way. No IT manager or any business manager or DevOps team is going to wake up in the morning and say, I haven't updated my contact info, and I changed my phone a couple weeks ago. Let me go into the system and update that. So it's important that you're following up, you're being proactive, and that's how you provide a good service to your customers. Vulnerability data being reported to asset owners manually. This is kind of the old way. 10 years ago, new systems being brought up. Hey, we want to scan it for vulnerabilities before we go live. Now, okay, let me run a manual scan. I'll send you that scan via email. That's a very manual process. That should really all be entirely automated. So the scanning should be automated, should be built into the server build process. The distribution of those reports all needs to be automated. And this is where kind of ChatGPT did hit it on the nail on the head a little bit with automation. But it needs to be completely automated. You should have a vulnerability management policy with a matrix of, hey, asset criticality, CVSS, vulnerability severity. There should be an SLA associated with each square in that box, each of that matrix, and reports should go out to the owners based on the SLA. All that should be automated. And if there are some systems out there that get close to doing that today, but I think our technologies, and that takes us to the last bullet point here, is our technologies, our tech stacks still have a way to go, because the tech stacks are really being built with like a single customer in mind. Some of them are good with, they've got more flexible role-based access control. Some of them might even have like a concept of multi-tenant, but nobody's really doing a great job of pulling all that information together in one spot and and giving you the flexibility to do what you need to do as a growing enterprise to service multiple customers. So that's my experience with enterprise operations over the last 12 years or so in security. I think tool integration, SOC metrics, management of SOC metrics. If you're not monitoring it, you're not managing it. Business must be empowered with the information it needs to make intelligent choices. So we're really here to provide analysis to the business. I think one mentality we get stuck in as cybersecurity folks is they have to do this. We need to, you can't put this on the network unless it is completely compliant. It's not the reality of the situation, right? So it's providing that analysis to the key decision holders. Say, hey, this is an old system. We can put these safeguards in place, but these are the risks. And you have to accept that. You can't let yourself get frustrated as a cybersecurity professional just because the business doesn't want to do everything you say you want them to do, as much as that would make our lives easy. But just have to kind of make sure you're floating that information up to the business so they can make a good decision. And focusing on scalable solutions that don't burn out your SOC teams. So with that said, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you all for coming today.